When I met Anna, I wasn't looking for love. At 37, I had just come out of the military after an injury ended my service career. Adjusting to civilian life was no easy feat, but Anna made it feel possible. She was 23 at the time, full of life and laughter, and her presence brought light into what had felt like a dark and uncertain period of my life. Our age difference raised a few eyebrows, but we didn't care. We were happy. For me, Anna's energy and passion for life were contagious. She worked as a primary school teacher and had this natural warmth about her that made everyone around her feel seen and valued. I'd catch her talking animatedly about her students, how one of them had learned to tie their shoes for the first time or how another had surprised her with a heartfelt drawing. She loved what she did, and I loved seeing her so passionate about it. I, on the other hand, had taken a quieter path after the military. I used to be all action, all adrenaline, but the injury I sustained meant that I had to slow down. I worked part-time now, consulting for a security firm, which gave me plenty of time to focus on building a life with Anna. We lived in a modest but cozy apartment in a quiet suburb. The living room was our favorite spot, with its oversized couch and walls lined with bookshelves that Anna had lovingly filled. She loved reading, often disappearing into the world of novels for hours at a time. I didn't mind. I'd sit next to her, tinkering with one of my old hobby projects or reading up on history, happy just to be in her presence. Anna had a way of making the mundane feel special. She'd hum a tune while making coffee in the morning or light a candle during dinner to create a cozy atmosphere. Despite her young age, she had a maturity and kindness that balanced out my more reserved and cautious nature. For the past 5 years, life had been good. Sure, we had our share of disagreements, who doesn't, but they were never anything we couldn't handle. We had a rhythm, a partnership that worked, and I thought we understood each other. Looking back now, I realize I may have been blind to the cracks that had started to form. But at the time, I was content, even hopeful, that our love could withstand anything life threw at us. How wrong I was. Life with Anna was what I'd always hoped for after leaving the military, a quiet, stable home with someone I loved. While my consulting work gave us financial security, Anna's job as a primary school teacher brought a sense of purpose to our lives. She'd come home brimming with stories about her students' antics, and I'd listen, smiling, as she animatedly recounted how one kid insisted that dinosaurs still roamed the earth. Our apartment was a reflection of the life we'd built together. It wasn't flashy, but it was ours. The bookshelves in the living room were packed with Anna's eclectic collection, romance novels, historical fiction, and the occasional thriller. A cozy armchair sat by the window, where she'd curl up with a book and a cup of tea after work. My own contributions to the decor were more subdued, a few framed photos of my military unit, some memorabilia from places I'd served, and the old wooden desk in the corner where I handled my consulting work. Anna had this knack for making ordinary moments feel extraordinary. Friday nights were our movie nights, complete with popcorn and a blanket fort we'd half-jokingly assemble in the living room. Saturday mornings meant pancakes and coffee, with sunlight streaming through the kitchen window as she teased me about my less-than-perfect flipping skills. She was the life of our small circle of friends, too. At parties or get-togethers, Anna's laughter would ring out, drawing people to her. She had this magnetic energy that balanced out my quieter, more reserved nature. It wasn't uncommon for her to come home with a new story about a fellow teacher or an amusing interaction with a parent at her school. Despite the age difference, we rarely felt out of sync. She'd jokingly call me her grumpy old man when I'd decline late-night outings, and I'd tease her about her inability to finish a single TV series without skipping ahead to the finale. It was a dynamic that worked, at least, that's what I thought. Looking back now, I realize I had started to take some of it for granted. The small gestures, her lighting a candle at dinner, or leaving little notes in my bag, began to blur into the background of our everyday lives. I assumed that our connection, our bond, was unshakable. But even in the happiest of lives, cracks can form. And sometimes, they grow so slowly and quietly that you don't notice them until it's too late. It was around our 5th anniversary that Anna's behavior started to change. At first, it was subtle, nothing that seemed out of place. She began talking about wanting more me time to reconnect with her hobbies. Knowing how much she loved to read, I thought it was a great idea. Then, out of nowhere, she announced she'd joined a book club. Book club? I repeated, surprised. Anna had always preferred reading alone, saying it was her way to escape reality and immerse herself in her own imagination. She'd often said that discussing books with others took away the magic for her. I know it sounds weird, she said with a sheepish smile. But one of the other teachers at school mentioned it, and I thought, why not? It might be fun to connect with other people who love reading as much as I do. I didn't question it. In fact, I was happy for her. Teaching could be demanding, and I figured having a social outlet would be good for her. She seemed excited about it, almost giddy as she described how they planned to meet every Wednesday evening to discuss their latest read. The first few weeks were uneventful. She'd leave after dinner, dressed casually, with her tote bag full of books. She'd come home a few hours later, often with new recommendations or stories about how the group had gone off on tangents. But then, her enthusiasm started to shift. She began preparing for these book club meetings as if they were more than casual get-togethers. She'd spend extra time picking out her outfit, carefully doing her hair and makeup in a way she never bothered with for our quiet evenings at home. When I teased her about it, she laughed it off. Come on, it's nice to look good sometimes. Besides, some of the ladies in the club are super stylish, can't let them outdo me. I smiled, though something about her tone felt off. Her obsession with the book club grew. She started leaving earlier and coming back later. Sometimes, she'd come home flushed and breathless, her explanations hurried. We went a little over time, she'd say, brushing past me as she dropped her bag by the door. I didn't think much of it at first. Anna had always been the type to dive headfirst into her interests, and I chalked it up to her personality. But then I noticed the gaps in her stories. She'd mention a book they were reading, only to forget its title a week later. When I casually asked about the other members, she struggled to remember their names. There's Lisa, or was it Linda? And, oh, you wouldn't know them, she'd say, dismissing the topic quickly. Her phone also became a constant companion, always buzzing with messages that she'd check and reply to with a small, secretive smile. When I asked what she was laughing at, she'd shrug. Just book club stuff. You wouldn't be interested. I wanted to trust her, I did. But the changes in her behavior planted a seed of doubt that I couldn't ignore. For the first time in our marriage, I started to feel like there was a part of her life I wasn't a part of. And it left me with a gnawing unease I couldn't quite shake. The changes in Anna's behavior became harder to ignore as the weeks went on. Her book club nights turned into a ritual she seemed to anticipate with an excitement that felt disproportionate. It wasn't just the meetings themselves, it was everything surrounding them. She'd spend time meticulously planning her outfits, debating between heels or flats, or whether a dress was too much. Don't you think it's a bit fancy for a book club? I asked one evening as she stood in front of the mirror, adjusting a delicate necklace I'd given her on her last birthday. Not at all, she said with a laugh, brushing a stray curl from her face. The other ladies put in effort too. It's just nice to feel good about yourself. I nodded, trying to push aside the unease creeping in. Anna had always cared about her appearance, but this felt different, like she was preparing for something beyond a casual discussion of paperbacks. Her phone, too, became an object of curiosity. It seemed to buzz constantly, especially on the nights leading up to her book club meetings. She'd glance at the screen, her lips curling into a faint smile, before quickly tucking it away. When I asked who it was, she'd always have a quick answer, just the group, sorting out logistics. At first, I tried to dismiss my doubts as paranoia. After all, Anna had never given me a reason to distrust her before. She was my wife, the woman I'd shared 5 years of my life with, and I didn't want to believe there was anything sinister behind her newfound hobby. But the inconsistencies started piling up. One Wednesday, she came home unusually late, well past midnight. When she walked through the door, her cheeks were flushed, and she looked startled to see me waiting on the couch. "Late night?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. "Yeah, sorry," she said, setting her bag down hastily. "We lost track of time. Lisa brought up some obscure French novel, and we just kept debating about it." "Lisa," I repeated. "I thought you said her name was Linda." She froze for half a second before laughing nervously. "Right, Linda. Sorry, it's been a long night." The moment passed quickly, but it stuck with me. Anna wasn't the type to forget details like that. Another time, I noticed something even stranger. As she was getting ready for one of her meetings, I saw her toss a book into her bag without even glancing at the cover. It was still wrapped in plastic, completely untouched. "Isn't that what you're supposed to be discussing tonight?" I asked. Yeah," she said, fumbling slightly. "But I already read it on my Kindle. This is just for show." Her explanation didn't sit right with me, but I let it go. The turning point came a week later. Anna left for her usual Wednesday meeting, kissing me goodbye with a bright smile and the scent of her perfume lingering in the air. But something about her demeanor felt rehearsed, almost too perfect. A couple of hours after she left, I decided to take a drive. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but the nagging suspicion in my gut wouldn't let me sit still. I drove past the community center where she'd said the book club met. The parking lot was almost empty, save for a couple of cars. I parked across the street and waited, my heart pounding as I watched the entrance. An hour passed, then 2. No sign of Anna. That night, when she returned home, her story was the same, another lively discussion, another late night with the girls. But as she spoke, I felt the weight of the unspoken between us growing heavier. I didn't confront her, not yet. But I knew I couldn't ignore the red flags any longer. Something was going on, and I needed to find out what. The more I observed Anna's behavior, the clearer it became that something wasn't right. She seemed to be walking a tightrope, balancing the life we shared with something else, something she didn't want me to see. I began to notice patterns. On book club nights, she'd leave at almost the exact same time, dressed to impress and humming to herself as she got ready. When she returned, she was often distracted, her responses to my questions vague or overly cheerful, as though she was trying to deflect attention. One evening, as she prepared to leave, I decided to ask a seemingly innocent question. "Do you mind if I drop you off tonight?" I offered. I thought it might be nice to see where this book club is. Her reaction was instantaneous, a brief flicker of panic before she quickly composed herself. "Oh, you don't have to do that," she said, waving me off. "It's out of your way, and I'll probably be late getting back anyway. I don't want you waiting around." "I don't mind," I said, keeping my tone light. She hesitated, then forced a laugh. "Seriously, James, it's just a bunch of ladies talking about books. It's not that exciting." Her response only fueled my suspicions. After she left, I sat in the living room, staring at the door and debating what to do next. Part of me wanted to trust her, to believe that her strange behavior had a reasonable explanation. But another part of me, the part honed by years of military training, knew that instincts like these shouldn't be ignored. That night, I decided to follow her. I waited until she'd been gone for about 15 minutes before grabbing my jacket and heading out. I knew the route she usually took to the community center, so I kept a safe distance, careful not to get too close. When I saw her car turn into the parking lot, my chest tightened. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe she really was attending the book club, and I was just being paranoid. But then, instead of parking, she drove straight through the lot and out the other side. I followed, my hands gripping the steering wheel as she took a series of turns that led to a residential neighborhood. She finally stopped in front of a house, modest but well-kept, with a neatly trimmed lawn and warm lights glowing from the windows. I parked a few houses down, watching as she got out of the car. That's when I saw him. A man stepped out onto the porch, tall and casually dressed, with an easy smile that made my stomach churn. He greeted Anna with familiarity, pulling her into a brief but intimate hug before leading her inside. I sat there, stunned, as the pieces fell into place. This wasn't book club. This wasn't even close to book club. I stayed in my car for what felt like hours, replaying the scene over and over in my mind. The man wasn't a stranger. I recognized him as one of the parents from Anna's school, someone she'd mentioned in passing a few times. "He's such a great dad," she'd said once, her voice full of admiration. So involved in his son's education. Now I understood why she'd spoken about him the way she had. By the time I drove home, my mind was racing with questions I didn't want to ask and answers I wasn't ready to face. The truth had started to unravel, and I knew there was no turning back. The next few days were unbearable. I tried to go about my routine as if nothing had changed, but the image of Anna with that man on his porch haunted me. Every time she smiled at me, every time she told me she loved me, I questioned whether any of it was real. I couldn't confront her, not yet. I needed proof. Proof that she couldn't twist or deny. Proof that would force her to face what she'd done. The following Wednesday, I decided to follow her again. This time, I was more deliberate. I left the apartment a few minutes after she did, keeping a safe distance as I tailed her. Sure enough, she followed the same pattern, driving past the supposed book club meeting and heading straight to the same neighborhood. When she parked in front of the man's house, I found a spot further down the street and watched as she got out of her car. She was dressed elegantly, in a way that felt far too polished for a simple evening with friends. As she approached the house, the door opened, and the man stepped out to greet her. I clenched my fists as he leaned in, kissing her on the cheek before guiding her inside. This time, I wasn't content to sit and watch. I waited for a few minutes, debating my next move. My heart was pounding, my thoughts racing with anger, hurt, and disbelief. Finally, I stepped out of my car and walked toward the house, each step fueled by a mix of adrenaline and dread. The curtains were drawn, but a small gap allowed me to see inside. What I saw confirmed everything I feared. Anna and the man, his name was Eric, I suddenly recalled, were sitting on the couch, laughing and talking with an intimacy that went beyond friendship. She leaned toward him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. The way she looked at him, the way he looked at her, it was undeniable. But then, it got worse. Eric leaned closer, brushing a strand of hair from her face before kissing her. She didn't pull away. Instead, she kissed him back, her hands resting on his shoulders as if this was the most natural thing in the world. I stumbled back, the air knocked out of me as though I'd been punched. My instincts screamed at me to burst through the door, to demand an explanation, to make them see the pain they were causing. But I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I returned to my car, my mind spinning as I struggled to process what I'd just seen. When Anna came home that night, she was all smiles, acting as if everything was normal. She kissed me on the cheek, her voice cheerful as she asked how my day had been. I stared at her, unable to reconcile the woman in front of me with the one I'd seen just hours earlier. "Fine," I said, my voice hollow. It was fine. But I knew it wasn't fine. Nothing about our life, our marriage, or the person I thought Anna was would ever feel fine again. I couldn't keep up the facade any longer. The betrayal was eating me alive, and every smile, every touch from Anna felt like a mockery of the life we'd built together. I needed answers, even if I wasn't ready for what they might be. It was Friday night, 2 days after I'd seen her with Eric. We were having dinner at home, something we always used to enjoy. Anna was talking about her day at school, her voice animated as she recounted how one of her students had drawn her a picture of their favorite superhero. I wasn't listening. My mind was elsewhere, replaying the moment I'd seen her kiss Eric, the ease with which she betrayed me. "Do you love him?" I blurted out, interrupting her mid-sentence. Her fork froze halfway to her mouth, and she stared at me, confused. "What? Do you love him?" I repeated, my voice sharper now. "James, what are you talking about?" she asked, her tone defensive. I pushed my plate aside, my appetite long gone. "I followed you, Anna. Wednesday night. I saw you with him. Eric." Her face drained of color, and for a moment, she said nothing. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. "You've been following me?" she finally asked, her voice trembling. "That's what you're focusing on?" I snapped. "I caught you, Anna. I saw everything. Don't act like I'm the one in the wrong here." Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't feel any sympathy. "Not this time. James, she began, but her voice faltered. "Don't lie to me," I said, my tone ice-cold. "Just tell me the truth. How long has this been going on?" She looked down at her hands, twisting her wedding ring nervously. "A few months," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut, even though I'd already suspected the truth. "Why, Anna?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Why would you do this to us?" "I don't know," she said, tears streaming down her face now. "I was feeling disconnected. From myself, from you. Eric, he made me feel special, like I mattered. But it didn't mean anything, James. I swear. It was stupid, and I hate myself for it." I shook my head, unable to comprehend what I was hearing. "It didn't mean anything. You've been sneaking around, lying to me, and kissing him, but it didn't mean anything. Do you even hear yourself?" She sobbed openly now, but her tears didn't move me. I felt hollow, as if the life we built together had been reduced to ashes. "I love you, James," she said desperately, reaching for my hand. "I made a mistake, a horrible mistake, but I want to fix this. Please, give me a chance." I pulled my hand away, standing up from the table. "You don't get to ask for that," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "Not after what you've done." Without another word, I walked out of the room, leaving Anna sobbing at the table. I needed to be alone, to process the magnitude of what had just happened. That night, I slept on the couch, staring at the ceiling as the weight of her betrayal settled over me. I'd thought our love was unbreakable, but now, I wasn't sure if there was anything left to save. The following days were some of the hardest of my life. The apartment felt like a prison, every corner a reminder of the love and trust Anna and I had built over the years, and the lies that had torn it apart. Anna tried to talk to me, but I couldn't bring myself to face her. Each time I looked at her, all I could see was her with Eric, the ease with which she betrayed me, and the lies she'd told to cover it up. "James," she said softly one morning, standing in the doorway as I sat on the couch, staring blankly at the wall. "Please, can we talk? I need you to hear me out." "I don't want to hear it, Anna," I said flatly. "I already know enough." "But you don't know everything," she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "I made a mistake, a terrible, unforgivable mistake, but I love you. You're my husband, and I want to fix this." I shook my head, the bitterness in my chest rising like bile. "You didn't think about that when you were sneaking around with him, did you? You didn't think about me, or us, or what this would do to our marriage." Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't have it in me to comfort her. I couldn't. The pain was too fresh, too raw. I threw myself into work, picking up every consulting assignment I could find to avoid being at home. But no matter how busy I kept myself, the memories followed me like a shadow. I'd see her in my mind, laughing with Eric, kissing him, holding him in ways she should have only held me. At night, the weight of it all crushed me. I'd lie awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. My thoughts spiraled. What had I missed? Was it something I'd done, or hadn't done? Had I failed her as a husband? One evening, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table with a bottle of whiskey, the glass in my hand untouched. Anna came home and froze when she saw me. "James," she said hesitantly, "please. I know I've hurt you, but we need to talk." I looked at her, the woman I'd loved for 5 years, and felt a surge of anger and sorrow so intense it nearly overwhelmed me. "What's there to talk about, Anna? You broke us. You broke me. And I don't know if I can ever forgive you for that." She sat down across from me, her hands trembling. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said, her voice barely audible. "But I want to try to make things right. I'll do anything, James. Therapy, counseling, whatever it takes. Just don't give up on us." Her desperation was clear, but I couldn't bring myself to care. The betrayal was too deep, the wounds too fresh. "I need time," I said finally, standing up and walking out of the room. Time was the only thing I could give myself now. Time to process, time to grieve, and time to decide whether the life we'd built together was even worth salvaging. But deep down, I already knew the answer. Some things, once broken, can never be put back together. "You said." Anna didn't give up, even when it was clear that I wanted nothing to do with her attempts to fix things. Each day, she tried a different way to reach me, but her efforts only felt like empty gestures against the weight of what she'd done. She started leaving handwritten notes in places she knew I'd find them, on the coffee table, in the drawer where I kept my keys, even on the bathroom mirror. Each one was filled with apologies and promises. "I'm sorry for what I've done. I'll spend the rest of my life proving I can be better. Please don't shut me out. I love you more than anything." At first, I ignored them. The words felt hollow, their sincerity drowned out by the betrayal that lingered between us. She also started cooking dinners every night, preparing my favorite meals as if a perfectly roasted chicken or a plate of lasagna could erase the pain. I'd eat a few bites out of necessity, but I never thanked her or acknowledged the effort. She'd sit across from me in silence, her eyes filled with sadness as she watched me go through the motions of living. On weekends, she'd suggest we go out, anything to break the oppressive silence that hung over the apartment. "Let's go for a walk," she said one Saturday morning. "We can go to the park, maybe get some coffee. It might help, to just be out of the house." "I'm not interested," I replied without looking up from the TV. "James, please," she said softly. "We can't just keep pretending this isn't happening. I know I hurt you, but we have to try." "You hurt us, Anna," I said, my voice cold. "And I don't think there's anything left to try for." Her shoulders sagged, and she turned away, her quiet sobs the only sound in the room. The truth was, I didn't know how to move forward. Part of me wanted to believe that she was genuinely sorry, that she was willing to put in the work to rebuild our marriage. But the other part of me, the part that replayed the memory of her with Eric every time I closed my eyes, couldn't let go of the pain. Even when she suggested therapy, I dismissed it. "We don't need a therapist," I said one evening when she brought it up again. "What we needed was for you to be honest. For you to respect what we had. And you couldn't do that." "I know I failed you," she said, her voice breaking. "But I'm here now, James. I'm trying." Her words hung in the air, but they didn't reach me. I was too broken, too consumed by anger and grief, to see any way forward. At night, I lay awake on the couch, the emptiness of the apartment pressing down on me like a weight I couldn't lift. Anna would lie in bed, her quiet sobs carrying through the walls, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. Not anymore. The life we built together was crumbling around us, and no matter how much she tried to hold on, I felt it slipping further away with each passing day. The days dragged on, and my life felt like it had come to a screeching halt. My routine was mechanical: get up, go to work, come home, and sit in silence. The weight of what had happened consumed me. I couldn't shake the image of Anna with Eric, the betrayal replaying in my mind like a broken record. Work became an escape, but even that started to crumble. I found it harder to focus during meetings and on assignments. Simple tasks that once felt effortless now required monumental effort. My consulting firm, built on my reliability and precision, was beginning to notice the cracks in my performance. "Everything okay, James?" my supervisor, Patrick, asked one afternoon. "You've been off lately. If you need time, we can adjust your workload." "I'm fine," I lied, forcing a smile. But I wasn't fine. The truth was, I didn't know how to handle the mess my life had become. The betrayal didn't just destroy my marriage, it destroyed my sense of stability, my ability to trust, and my confidence in myself. At home, things were no better. Anna's efforts to fix things only made the distance between us feel wider. Her notes, her dinners, her apologies, they all felt like futile attempts to patch a ship that was already sinking. One night, as I sat on the couch staring blankly at the TV, Anna sat down beside me. "James," she said softly, "I know I've said this 100 times, but I'm so sorry. I can't take back what I've done, but I want to help you heal. Even if it's too late for us, I need you to be okay." I turned to look at her, and for the first time in weeks, I saw the depth of her guilt etched into her face. She looked exhausted, her usual spark dimmed by the weight of her own actions. "Do you think I'll ever be okay again?" I asked, my voice cracking. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached for my hand, holding it gently. "I hope so," she whispered. "Even if it means you move on without me." Her words hit me harder than I expected. For all her mistakes, Anna wasn't my enemy. She was just as broken as I was, trapped in the wreckage of a life we'd built together and then destroyed. But understanding that didn't make the pain go away. As the days turned into weeks, my mental state continued to deteriorate. I began to withdraw from friends and colleagues, unable to muster the energy to explain what I was going through. Nights were the hardest, alone with my thoughts, the silence of the apartment amplifying every regret, every unanswered question. Why wasn't I enough? Why did she choose him? The questions spiraled into darker thoughts, and for the first time in my life, I began to wonder if there was a way out of the pain. I hated that I felt that way, hated that Anna's choices had pushed me to the brink. But the reality was inescapable: my life, as I knew it, had been destroyed. And I had no idea how to put the pieces back together. The weeks that followed were a blur of anguish and hopelessness. My once stable life had crumbled, leaving behind only a shell of the person I used to be. The betrayal had robbed me of not just my marriage, but my sense of purpose and self-worth. I stopped taking on new work assignments, telling Patrick I needed some time to sort things out. My nights were restless, plagued by the same questions and doubts that haunted me since the day I saw Anna with Eric. During the day, I'd sit in silence, replaying the last 5 years of my life. I thought about how much I trusted her, how certain I was that our love was unshakable. And now, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything had been a lie. The anger I felt toward Anna began to morph into something more insidious, a deep, consuming despair that left me questioning everything, including whether life was even worth continuing. One night, as I sat at the kitchen table nursing a glass of whiskey, the thought crept in again: would anyone even care if I were gone? I stared at the bottle, feeling the weight of my thoughts pressing down on me. I hated myself for even considering it. I had always prided myself on my strength, on my ability to endure. But now, I felt like I had nothing left to hold on to. That night, I found myself on the edge, the pain so overwhelming that I could barely think straight. But as I sat there, contemplating the unthinkable, a memory surfaced, a moment from my time in the military. I remembered a buddy of mine, Kyle, who had struggled after a particularly rough deployment. He'd hit rock bottom, just like I had. But instead of giving up, he'd reached out, confiding in a few of us who understood what he was going through. I remembered what he said to me once: "You don't have to do this alone, James. No matter how bad it gets, there's always a way out, just not the one you're thinking of." Those words echoed in my mind, pulling me back from the brink. The next morning, I called Mike, an old friend from my military days. We hadn't talked much since I left the service, but I knew he was the kind of person who would understand. "Mike," I said, my voice trembling, "I need to get out of this house. You up for a drink tonight?" "Hell yeah," he replied, his tone warm and reassuring. "Whatever you need, brother." That evening, I met Mike at a bar downtown, the kind of place where the music was loud, and the drinks were strong. As we caught up, laughing over old memories and swapping stories about our post-military lives, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in weeks: connection. But it wasn't just Mike who helped me that night. It was also the chance meeting that would change everything, the moment I met her. That night at the bar with Mike was the first time in weeks that I felt a glimmer of normalcy. Talking about old times and sharing a few laughs gave me a reprieve from the dark cloud that had been hanging over me. We were a few drinks in when Mike suddenly waved someone over. "Hey, Grace. Over here," he called out. A woman approached, her presence lighting up the room like a quiet beacon. She had wavy auburn hair that fell just past her shoulders, striking green eyes, and a warm, genuine smile. She wasn't overly done up, just effortlessly put together in a way that drew you in. "James, this is Grace," Mike said, gesturing between us. "She's a friend of my sister's. Grace, meet James, one of my oldest buddies." She extended her hand, her grip firm but soft. "Nice to meet you, James," she said, her voice carrying a mix of confidence and kindness. "You too," I replied, feeling an odd sense of ease I hadn't experienced in a long time. Grace joined us at the table, and before I knew it, the three of us were deep in conversation. She was funny, quick-witted, and easy to talk to. There was something about her energy that felt different. She didn't pry or ask questions that were too personal, but her genuine interest in what I had to say was refreshing. As the night went on, Mike eventually excused himself, claiming he needed to check on something at the bar. Grace and I were left alone, and the conversation naturally shifted to more personal topics. "So, how do you know Mike?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. "We served together in the military," I explained. "He's one of the good ones, always has been." She smiled. "He speaks just as highly of you." I chuckled, feeling a faint blush creep up. That sounds like Mike. For the first time in what felt like forever, I found myself opening up without hesitation. I told her a little about my time in the military, my work, and even the struggles I'd faced recently, though I kept the specifics vague. "I've been through some tough times too," she admitted, her eyes softening. "Life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them." Her words struck a chord. She didn't need to elaborate, her empathy was clear. By the time the bar was closing, I realized how much I'd enjoyed the night. For a few hours, I'd forgotten about Anna, about Eric, about the pain I'd been carrying. As we walked out, Grace hesitated for a moment before turning to me. "It was really nice meeting you, James. Maybe we could do this again sometime." I nodded, a small but genuine smile forming on my face. "I'd like that." As she walked away, I felt something stir inside me, a faint, cautious hope. It was too soon to know what it meant, but for the first time in months, I felt like maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward. Meeting Grace marked a turning point in my life, though I didn't realize it at first. In the days that followed, her smile and kind words lingered in my mind. For the first time since Anna's betrayal, I felt like there was something, someone, worth looking forward to. We exchanged numbers through Mike, and after a couple of text conversations that felt natural and unforced, we decided to meet for coffee. The coffee shop was small and quiet, a perfect place for a real conversation. When Grace walked in, she greeted me with the same warm smile that had disarmed me at the bar. She ordered a chai latte, and we sat by the window, the world outside a blur as we lost ourselves in conversation. Grace was unlike anyone I'd ever met. She had a way of making you feel heard, as though every word you said mattered. She told me about her work as a freelance graphic designer, her love of hiking, and the close-knit group of friends she'd built over the years. "I've been through some rough patches," she said, her voice soft but steady. "But I've learned that it's not about what knocks you down, it's about how you get back up." Her words resonated deeply. I found myself opening up about Anna, about the betrayal and the pain it had caused. I kept it simple, not wanting to overwhelm her, but Grace listened without judgment, her gaze steady and reassuring. "That's a lot to carry," she said when I finished. "But it doesn't define you, James. You're more than the hurt someone else caused." Her words stayed with me long after our coffee date ended. Grace had a way of cutting through the noise in my head, helping me see a version of myself I thought was gone. Over the next few weeks, we continued to see each other. What started as casual outings, coffee, walks in the park, the occasional dinner, quickly grew into something deeper. Grace had a way of drawing me out, helping me rediscover the parts of myself I'd buried under layers of pain and regret. But not everyone was happy about the changes in my life. Anna noticed the difference almost immediately. I was spending less time at home, and when I was there, I was no longer brooding in silence. My interactions with her became curt, not out of anger but because I no longer felt the need to engage. One evening, as I was getting ready to meet Grace for dinner, Anna stopped me in the hallway. "James, wait," she said, her voice trembling. "Can we talk?" I sighed, turning to face her. "What is it, Anna?" "I know something's changed," she said, tears welling up in her eyes. "You're moving on, aren't you? You've met someone." Her words hung in the air, heavy with a mixture of sadness and desperation. "I have," I admitted, my tone calm but firm. "And for the first time in a long time, I feel happy." Anna broke down, her sobs filling the space between us. "I can't lose you, James," she cried. "I know I hurt you, but I still love you. Please, don't do this." Her words stung, but they no longer had the power to sway me. The love I once felt for Anna had been replaced by something stronger, a determination to reclaim my life and find happiness again. "I'm sorry, Anna," I said quietly. "But this isn't about you anymore. It's about me. And I deserve to move forward." That night, as I sat across from Grace at dinner, I realized just how far I'd come. The darkness that had consumed me for months was beginning to lift, replaced by a cautious but undeniable hope. For the first time in what felt like forever, I believed in the possibility of a brighter future. As my connection with Grace deepened, I began to feel like I was waking up from a long, dark dream. She brought something into my life that I hadn't felt in years, a sense of calm, of stability, of hope. Grace wasn't just a distraction from the pain Anna had caused, she was a reminder of what love could be. She didn't push or pry, but her presence alone was enough to help me start healing. We spent hours talking about everything and nothing, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could just be myself. One afternoon, as we hiked a nearby trail, a suggestion she'd made to help me clear my head, she stopped to admire the view. "It's funny," she said, her voice thoughtful. "How life can surprise you when you least expect it. I wasn't looking for anything when we met, but I'm glad I found you." Her words left me speechless. All I could do was nod, overcome with gratitude that someone as kind and grounded as Grace had walked into my life when I needed it most. But as much as Grace and I were building something new, Anna's presence lingered like a shadow. She wasn't ready to let go, and her attempts to reinsert herself into my life grew more frequent. One evening, I returned home to find her waiting in the living room, her face pale and drawn. "James," she began, standing as I entered. "I know I don't have the right to ask this, but, can we talk?" "We've said everything there is to say, Anna," I replied, keeping my tone even. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "Just give me 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." I sighed, gesturing for her to speak. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she said, wringing her hands. "About us, about everything I did to hurt you. I can't undo it, James, but I want to be better, for you, for us. I still love you. Can't we try again?" Her words hit me like a wave, but instead of feeling the pull of her desperation, I felt a quiet resolve. "Anna," I said, my voice firm but gentle, "you don't get to decide what happens next. You made your choices, and I've made mine. I'm moving on, and I think you should too." Her tears started again, but this time, I didn't feel the need to comfort her. Instead, I walked to the door, opening it with finality. "This isn't about hate or anger," I said. "It's about what I need to heal. And what I need is to let go of the past." Anna left that night, and for the first time, I felt like I'd truly closed the chapter on our marriage. Grace and I continued to grow closer, and with every passing day, I felt more like the man I used to be, or maybe, someone better. She encouraged me to get back to work, to reconnect with old friends, and to rediscover the parts of myself I thought were lost forever. One evening, as we sat on her couch watching a movie, she turned to me with a smile. "You know," she said, her tone light, "I think you're stronger than you realize." "Maybe," I replied, taking her hand. "But I wouldn't have gotten here without you." For the first time in months, I felt like I had a future worth looking forward to, and this time, I wasn't afraid to embrace it. Looking back on everything, I can hardly believe how much my life has changed. A year ago, I thought I'd lost everything, my marriage, my sense of purpose, and my faith in love. Anna's betrayal shook me to my core, leaving me broken and directionless. But now, as I sit here reflecting on the journey, I see how even the darkest moments can lead to something better. The pain I experienced wasn't something I would wish on anyone. It was raw, overwhelming, and at times unbearable. But it taught me something I'll carry with me for the rest of my life: you can't control what happens to you, but you can choose how you respond. For a long time, I let Anna's actions define me. I let the betrayal consume me, drowning in questions that had no answers. But the truth is, her choices weren't a reflection of me, they were a reflection of her. Meeting Grace showed me that love isn't about perfection or control, it's about mutual respect, understanding, and a willingness to grow together. Grace didn't try to fix me, and she didn't expect me to heal overnight. She simply stood by my side, reminding me of my worth when I'd forgotten it myself. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that healing isn't linear. It's messy, slow, and often frustrating. There were times when I wanted to give up, when the weight of it all felt too much. But those moments taught me resilience. They showed me that even when life feels unbearable, there's always a way forward, if you're willing to take the first step. To anyone who finds themselves in a similar situation, I would say this: don't let someone else's mistakes define you. You are more than the hurt they caused, more than the doubts they planted. And while it might take time, you can find happiness again, whether that's with someone new or simply within yourself. As for Anna, I've let go of my anger. I don't hate her, and I don't wish her ill. She was a part of my life for a reason, and even though it ended painfully, it taught me lessons I wouldn't trade for anything. Now, as I look toward the future with Grace, I feel a cautious but genuine hope. Life isn't perfect, and it never will be. But it's the imperfections, the struggles, and the triumphs that make it worth living. The moral of my story: life will knock you down, sometimes in ways you never see coming. But it's not the fall that defines you, it's how you rise. And sometimes, rising means letting go of the past and choosing to embrace the possibility of something new. I've done that, and for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm meant to be.